All right, Eric Schwartz.
Hi there.
Good to have you here. I'm Bret Kinsella, everybody. I'm the founder of Voicebot.ai, and we are here for another game. That's the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every week at 12 noon on Thursdays. And we run live on LinkedIn as well as on YouTube. And everyone can watch this afterwards on YouTube. Many of you probably are watching this afterwards on YouTube, but we hope you join us live. If you are on LinkedIn or you are on YouTube, you can submit comments about some of the topics that we're going to talk about this week. And while we're talking, and we'll try to respond to them in real time if we can. So definitely bring those in. And today we have a special guest, Brandon Kaplan. Welcome.
Hello, how you doing?
So Brandon, tell the people who you are.
I am the Chief Innovation Officer at Journey, which is a innovation and consumer experience consultancy based all over the world.
Awesome. All right. Hello, Michael Stanislawik. Thanks for being here. Mikel was actually our very first guest host. He sat in with Eric a couple weeks ago, and I've been gone for 2 weeks. I was in Barcelona, and then I was in Barcelona, and then I'm sick, and like all these other types of things. But really glad to be back here. And we have like an incredible rundown today for the story. So we're going to be talking about enterprise, things like Salesforce with GPT. We're going to talk about Slack with GPT, maybe sort of the hottest story in the tech industry because everyone uses Slack. Grammarly's got some new features out. And just down the line, you can talk to ChatGPT with an avatar in real time, all these really cool things. So without further ado, let's get into it because we try to get through a lot of news in a very short period of time. And the first story today is SlackGPT. Okay, so a couple really interesting things about this. A ton of announcements this week from Salesforce. If you don't recall, Salesforce does own Slack. And they announced that there's this new SlackGPT integration, but it's actually created by OpenAI. And if you want to sign up for it, which you do have to sign up for it because it's in beta, you actually have to go to OpenAI to do it. So although our friends over at Salesforce were the ones who kind of announced this on behalf of OpenAI, OpenAI is running it, and they're running it internally. And there's some interesting aspects here. Last time I checked, Microsoft owns, I think, 49% of OpenAI, and Teams is the biggest competitor to Slack. But the folks at OpenAI use Slack. And in any event, we see yet another big platform adding some sort of large language model feature. What do you think, Brandon?
We were talking about this. I think it's interesting. This wave of integrations is people taking a ChatGPT style widget and bolting it on. It seems like a really smart first step. It seems like a really logical step for everybody, kind of getting used to the technology in their tool set, and adds a lot of value in short.
Yeah, fair enough. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Salesforce is a giant company. They need to stay ahead on these kinds of trends when it comes to software technology, and both the SlackGPT and their plans for generative AI and ChatGPT for the Salesforce product itself, I think show both how important they think this technology is, and present a real opportunity to get it into the hands of a lot of businesses and a lot of people very quickly.
Yeah, one of the things that we saw last fall was Canva, Pixar, a lot of these platforms that had a lot of users, tens of millions, maybe even 100 million users. If you look at like Pixar, they were adding generative AI capabilities. First, it was the text-to-image makers or text-to-image generators. And then we started seeing all these companies starting to add some sort of GPT-3 integration so they could actually write copy and all these other types of things. And I will say that this is one of the things when I was looking at the thesis here around generative AI that got me pretty enthusiastic about where this is going to head. Because not only do we have the demand signal from what I would consider to be consumer-ish, which is we have the 100 million monthly active users in 6 weeks on ChatGPT. I suspect that might have actually retreated a little bit, but okay, still, it's tens of millions of monthly active users on that. So that's a good signal to say, oh, this isn't necessarily just like a fad. And then the second thing that we saw was all of these companies just like doing these plugins. And some of them seems like kind of competitive parity. I got to keep up with everybody in order to do this. But at the same time, most of these platforms don't do this lightly, right? It's I mean, this is easier than some integrations, those types of things, but they've got these really long product roadmaps. And so if I think about, that's like another source of demand. It's demand for the API, just like we had demand for the end use. I think that that's a really good signal that we've got something that's here to stay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would just say that it's the idea of whether you're creating a new product or whether you're augmenting an existing product, which Salesforce seems very eager to do, especially is that because they know people use Salesforce, they know people use Slack. How can they make sure that people stay with it even when alternatives with different features are coming out? They have to offer the same features, even if not that many people use it, or honestly, even if only a small fraction of Slack or Salesforce users engage with these features. That's a lot of people and a lot of companies and a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean these kind of add-ons are absolute friction killers, right? Like these are things that when you've met with or spoken with people at these companies before, they've been trying to build these types of tools over years.
Yes.
And this kind of recent advent of public LLMs and APIs allowing them to bolt these technologies on, it just absolutely kills friction. And it allows people to do the things that were huge bottlenecks to before: summarizing, creating quick copy, writing an email, filling in forms. These are those utilities that often these innovations attack first, get great use. And then we start to get creative and figure out the other, flexible use cases after that. But it's a great first step.
Yeah, and that's a great transition actually to these flexible use cases, because sure, we've got this idea that you could click over a tab and get another like writing assistant that could help you and then come back and bring it into your primary application. And that's, that is friction. That's something that's kind of annoying. It's easier just to have it all integrated. But then you have things like Salesforce with EinsteinGPT. And I love this. Eric created this image of Einstein coming back because it was here and then it was sort of gone. They said it wasn't gone, but it actually was gone, right?
They created a voice and then they got rid of the voice. And
I know, it was like the chatbot's gone, but Einstein's working in the background. But now they have this new Einstein feature, which is one of the greatest things: summarization. So if anyone's used a CRM or Salesforce, Salesforce in particular, but any CRM, sometimes you just need to figure out what's going on and be able to do a quick summarization. It's great. Now they also have the research. So if you want to learn about a client or something like that, it'll pull stuff from the web for you as well. Could you do that in another tab? Yes, that's the lower friction. But the summarization feature and be able to pull that information in very quickly to get up to context, really, really useful.
Yeah, and I think it's really powerful, the email creation, right? Like you either live in two camps. If you live in some type of an outbound business, you either are a really kind of hands-on, I want to write individual messages to people, I want to be very personalized, or you're I write one email, I blast it out to 4,000 people, let's see what happens. And you can kind of tell where people live in that camp. This blurs those lines in where you can dynamically be generating emails to partners and prospects, and it's going to be a wild tool to see how people are utilizing it. Unfortunately, some people will turn it into a spam machine, but how others will use it to generate really meaningful business conversations.
Yeah, and also personalize them. I mean, even when it's not composing the text itself, Salesforce has this idea of it being useful for customer service agents or just anyone, salespeople who are talking to customers, and the AI can essentially listen in and act like a very helpful invisible assistant, passing notes about, and this customer has used this before, or you can remind them about things that they haven't mentioned themselves, and really be a more, again, dynamic being an important word, a more dynamic helper for these meetings, instead of having to open a tab and go through a database or anything like that. It's really about making it a more immediately useful research assistant and so on.
Yeah, I like that too. And by the way, if anybody's ever used Slack or Discord or Teams or anything like that, and you go into a channel or you go into a thread and someone just like adds you to it afterwards, oh my gosh, like the summarization feature, I was like, geez, because it can be terrible. Like you might have to read days or like even a week's worth of messages back and forth between people. And a lot of it's just nonsense, right? It's just like, they're just chatting. And they'll talk about the game in the middle or something like that, just because we're humans and like they're interacting. But even with that, it's like, oh, the most important thing was 6 days ago at 12:20. But how do you find it in 75 or 150 messages? So I love that. Now, staying in this very theme, Grammarly announced today. Eric, you have a story about it. Grammarly added generative AI features. I think they would say they've been using AI for a long time in Grammarly, but certainly not generative in the way that the new features are rolling out today.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Grammarly has been slowly expanding its remit from, obviously based on the name, originally about spell check and a more advanced grammar and style help, to now straight up writing assistant, writing editor. They're working with OpenAI. They're using an OpenAI API, and instead of trying to transform their own algorithm. But I guess the idea is that it will they'll complement each other, and you'll be able to use generative AI to write something or to help edit something or produce a report or something, and then Grammarly will be there helping you with all the other maybe nitpicky or important spelling checks and stuff that sometimes, honestly, generative AI is not always perfect at putting together. It'll spot when it writes a nonsense sentence and help you clear that up, which honestly would be a big help for some of the people who are using ChatGPT to try to write an article or an essay.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yet we're going from 0 to 60 on this. We're going from, we had no access to AI writing assistants, to now every single platform and every single website and every single service is going to have their derivative of a GPT. And it's like going into a retail store and no one wants to talk to you and you feel lonely and you're just wandering around, to now you have 50 salespeople attacking you, trying to sell you something. Everyone has to define their value proposition. Why would I go to Grammarly versus one of the other 12 services? Is it contextual? I'm using the AI service on the platform I'm currently on. Would I go out to Grammarly to pull it back into Salesforce if Salesforce already has a GPT model? So it'll be interesting to see how this all smooths out and where the value propositions rise to the top through these technologies.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to me because, first of all, a lot of people don't realize how big Grammarly is. Like, they announced a year and a half ago that they had 30 million monthly active users. Actually, that might even be daily active users, but it's like tens of millions of daily active users. And it's, I think Eric would say, like, everyone he knows uses it at least at some level, right? And then you have all these writing assistants coming on. You think about like WordTune from AI21, really popular. Some of the first ones actually, add the generative features in there. They came out with the spices feature to like add updated content, like stats and things like that. All these, and that's a real threat to Grammarly, which came out and was like sort of the dominant player in the space.
Yeah.
And adding generative, in some ways is just like maintaining competitive parity, like getting, making sure people don't leave. But also, if I look at Grammarly, if you start using it beyond just spell check, essentially, or just grammar check, it becomes that much more valuable to you. And what I look at is what they're doing today is putting them directly in competition with Jasper AI, which would have been kind of unthinkable 6 months ago.
Yeah. And I would just say that, Grammarly definitely understood, I think, that situation. They started putting out their own tone rewrite options near the end of last year, but with somewhat limited options, as opposed to now where, thanks to using generative AI models, using OpenAI, a user can say whatever tone they want it to be and create and rewrite the essay or whatever in whatever form they want. But I think it's what's key to that is that what Brandon was saying before about how quickly it's all happening is that Grammarly has a lot of research scientists, developers, and a lot of data. They could have theoretically created their own generative AI interface, but the speed matters. So it's faster and easier for them to use an API and then just go from there, perhaps produce an interface of their own later on or combine it with OpenAI.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we see these big platforms who are adding this as a new feature. I think it's going to make something like Grammarly even stickier because like Grammarly, like, why is it sticky? It's not really sticky. They tell you like how many words you've written or something like that. But like if you left it tomorrow and used another grammar checker, it really wouldn't matter to you. But if you are actually starting to write things and it's storing those and allowing you to create folders of past work and all these other types of things, then it becomes actually a composing and editing platform. And that's really fascinating. That's what I look at, like something like WordTune or something like Jasper. Jasper's really focused on the generative side. WordTune's more on polishing and additive and those types of things. But I actually think this is going to force WordTune into doing generative as well. They've stayed away for that, saying we want to help you polish, we want humans to polish their work. I think they're going to have to add the generative, just because Grammarly is going to be a key competitor. Now it's like Jasper, and there's a lot of other players in there, but all these ones are coming together and they're all going to have sort of the same solution stack. And the question is now, how are you going to differentiate?
It's pretty interesting. The tone bit is one that we've got to see how that evolves, right? Like right now, the tone feels like a novelty, right? Write my note to my team in the Shakespearean style. That's fun, like once. But the kind of convergence of, if everyone begins to use this to nuance their copy, the analytics behind that will show how people respond positively or negatively to sentence structure and tone, could there eventually be like a best practice tone that everyone gets filtered into a best possible tone that you don't really think about today, and then we all just start sounding exactly the same and become like a creepy, homogenous toned society? We'll see.
It'll be, what is that? The transatlantic accent that all the actors had in the 40s and 50s. We'll all start sounding like that. Lauren Bacall.
Yeah. I will say Grammarly does make a point of saying that, because if you're a registered user, it does collect your data and like have an idea of how you write, and it can use that to inform some of the suggestions it gives you. So this being the benefit of having an easy API to include, is that they can be a little more leisurely about leveraging what they already have to improve upon the generative AI services.
Absolutely. And Mikhail said it right here in the comments. Second brain. I mean, that's what we're doing. The thing is, I don't think it's going to be a second brain. I think it's going to be like a seventh, eighth, it's N number of additional brains. And so that's one of the things we're going to have to manage. Today it's communication channels. Like, how many ways do we interact with people? Where did we interact with them last? How do we remember? And those types of things. So that's going to lead to this opportunity for some sort of overlay service. And what would that be called? An assistant. All right. So we'll move on to another topic here. Our friends at DuckDuckGo and Brave, both this past week, announced new solutions for search functionality. So Brave, a lot of people think of as a browser, but they also do actually have their own search that's embedded in it. And what they both done is said, oh, well, we're not going to do what Bing is doing. We're not going to give you a chat interface. They don't really say that, but like, they ignore that like that's a thing. We're just going to give you summarization, because we think that that's the magic element here. And so now they're doing summarization. Brave's doing it based on like extracting from what it thinks is the top response. I believe that DuckDuckGo, and Eric, you can talk about this, is doing it based on some sort of Wikipedia entry. Whether that's a good or bad move, I don't know. But what do we think about search changing? We're thinking about conversational search, but now we've got the summarization search. And how does this shake out?
I mean, Google's had action boxes and snippets for a long time, and that's kind of derivatively created SEO tactics. I think it's interesting to be using these kind of GPT technologies to create really good summaries. What I loved seeing in the examples that they had was the attribution. And when we talk to our clients who are in publishing, the attribution and the IP protection is a main concern. And if you think about the future of SEO and sponsored content, the ability to show that attribution is key. And in the future, are we going to have LLMs that are trained and retrained based on who happens to be sponsored content of the week? I don't know. We'll see how that all plays out.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, which is why the Wikipedia is so, it's interesting that they're using Wikipedia, specifically the option that companies have to download all of Wikipedia and use it as a resource, which is updated every so often. But the idea that Wikipedia is relatively transparent, relatively comprehensive, certainly when it comes to very big subjects or subjects that are not really not controversial, but just not up for debate. They use as an example a sort of light topic, but when somebody writes in what is the dress, the AI knows enough to refer to the viral dress color situation and to answer it, and to answer the question of what color is it using Wikipedia. That's not really something that's going to be problematic. But I think that the attribution element is why they're using Wikipedia. It's why they're supplementing it with Britannica and related things. But for DuckDuckGo, where it's all about privacy, having sort of that super public, out in the open sourcing is an important part of what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I would just like differentiate for people. There's the summarization feature, and there's two different ways to do summarization. There's this like summarize the top answer, the result from the top answer, or what would be the top link. And that's really what the Google answer box is. Knowledge panels are a little different. They integrate from multiple places, but answer boxes. And that's really what Brave and DuckDuckGo are doing right now. It's like the least, it's basically like bringing them up to speed with what's been happening for 7 years now, which is okay, because now they have the technology. It's easily accessible to do that. But what Opera's doing, what Bing's doing, what Bard is going to be doing, this is much more, Perplexity is doing much more sophisticated, and that attribution is really key. And Mikkel said in the chat here, how do you write content that is summarized in such a way that prompts a user to still click and read the whole thing? And I think that is one of the key things. I wrote about this, how SEO is going to change in the space, because you have to think about a couple of different things. One is, if they hit your page and there's a summarization feature in the browser for what that page means, how do you make sure that it summarizes it in a way that gets your core message across if people aren't necessarily going to start clicking around your website to figure out what your marketing team wanted to tell people? And the second thing is this idea of the attribution. I just can't stress this enough. We think about search, and what Google does, it gives you maybe there's 3 or 4 elements of whatever you ask, and it just figures out what's the most important and gives you the answer that it thinks can answer like point number 1 that it thinks is more important. Or sometimes it'll take, hey, you've got 2 or 3 different concepts in there. I'll take the one that's like best across those 3 things, right? So that's what it is. So you get that, and that's how the blue links are arranged. But what happens is, what if you're the best answer for the third part, or the nuanced aspect of that never got surfaced before? It was like SERP 15. Right? It was like, you might be 150, 200 links down in the list. No one would ever see you. But now it's like the third citation in the Bing response. And all of a sudden you get all this visibility. So I think it's actually going to help people that are really good on niche and very specific types of topics, that as these things get surfaced, they might be that third or fourth citation as the AI is trying to round out the answer and give people more than just a simple blue link or an answer box solution.
That's a good point.
Okay, should we move on to AI21? So, how many people here know AI21? Very cool company. They are a competitor to OpenAI. They have a large language model. They also have the product. We mentioned WordTune earlier. So they have that sort of full stack, but they've really been pushing their APIs recently. Eric, you've talked to them about this, and you've actually tried Jurassic2. You got early access to it. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Jurassic2, unsurprisingly, the upgraded version of Jurassic1, which is the large language model AI21 came out with a couple years ago. It's the basis for all kinds of generative AI features, and now they have a new version that is they're very unsurprisingly very proud of, that they claim is just way more powerful. It's faster. They say 30% faster time. It comes in multiple languages. It's really a direct competitor for OpenAI in a lot of ways, and according to them, they claim it's as good, or in some cases even better, than what OpenAI offers. And one of the interesting approaches they have is that rather than have a sort of one-size-fits-all version of Jurassic2, they actually have 3 different ones depending on the size of the model itself. Although it can be a little confusing, because from smallest to largest, it's large, grande, and jumbo. So not necessarily informative of which is which. But in terms of how powerful it is, the jumbo level, it's pretty amazing. And they put it out with a bunch of new specific APIs for some of these features we've talked about. So rather than having just a general API for ChatGPT, which can do all kinds of things, they're putting out APIs specifically for paraphrasing or summarizing or correcting grammar or searching through text and splitting it up and really sort of narrowing it down, which presumably would also make it easier to include into a website or a software of some kind. It's pretty exciting. I think it's already being used in a lot of cases where people don't necessarily realize that generative AI is a tool, but I think this is going to really give them an edge in trying to compete for market share as we talked about, as it's become incredibly competitive very quickly.
It's pretty interesting. Like there's so many layers to these conversations, but two of kind of the rocket boosters to how these platforms are growing is, one, which platform that's often a cloud provider is kind of selecting these organizations as their platform partner, right? It's like, well, we're going to partner, we're going to really put your technology in front of all of our users. Oh, by the way, everything you process should flow through our cloud. So that's like one interesting conversation. And then to your point, it's very like use case specific. We've got clients that we're talking to, and they're concerned about using one platform because they're concerned about protecting their IP. But if there's a strategic partnership with another platform that works in a way they want or delivers the user experience they want. So it'll be interesting to see how these kind of alliances shake out and who remains after some time.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. We talk about this era of hybrid cloud where people don't want to be dependent on just one cloud provider. And so there's all these tools out there to help people do that. And usually when we talk about hybrid LLM, we're talking about like the integration of NLU with LLM. But there's this idea of a hybrid LLM infrastructure where you might use AI21 for certain types of things. You might use GPT-3, the new turbo model, for other things, for like your chat or something like that. And occur here, or as Anthropic starts to roll out their APIs, and I assume at some point Google's going to have APIs as well. So I see this as a good thing. I like to see competition, and one of the things I thought was really interesting is Eric got early access to this. These models just get better, and so we have sort of a standard spec. We run evaluations against some of the different models for different types of generative text tasks. And it is better. So, and like it's comparable. So like that's really good to see. All right, go ahead. You got one more thing?
There was a time I remember in like the heat of the Alexa wave, right, where Amazon was going around with the car companies saying, people want the same assistant in their car that they have in their home. And this is why you should have this kind of like ecosystem. And I could see marketing messaging coming out that's like, listen, people are using ChatGPT at home. They want to make sure that that's the same AI that exists. Their history is across different modalities. It'll be interesting to see what kind of like marketing messaging comes out to drive these platforms forward.
Yeah, I think this will be an assistant that'll have LLMs, it'll have NLUs behind it. It's going to be the type of thing it's going to have APIs. I don't know. I mean, there's a big incentive to be a walled garden everywhere. But as they open it up, there's going to be this opportunity for finally an independent type of assistant to bring all of your conversations, all of your data, all your personalization together. That's kind of exciting. Now, another thing that we saw this week was talk to ChatGPT, which is pretty fun. These are our friends over at DID. So let's see. At the risk of doing a live demo, let's see how this works. Hey, Alice, how are you today? Oh, you probably can't hear that, can you?
So that's like faint.
Yeah, it's running through my. It's not running through my my background, so I'll just I'll take that off. But in any event, you can see she's talking back to me. Really interesting. I mean, I think one of the things that I think is interesting about this is, first of all, we've had chatbots for a while, this disembodied conversation. Most of them are not very good. Some are okay. Like you can talk back and forth. You put an LLM behind them. We've seen that with ChatGPT, a lot more interesting. People will spend hours talking to them, just like chatting about a lot of things. What about putting an avatar in front of it? I mean, there's some technology here, which DID rolled out last week, which I think is important because you have to be able to stream the avatar. And this is like any avatars that you're interacting with, these virtual humans, there's some sort of pre-recording that's going on in order to make that actually work and like a seamless activity. So DID has a streaming solution now, so it can just like come up with anything that's new, like generative text from GPT-3 or something else, and talk to you. I'm just wondering though, we have this disembodied chatbot box, like all over the place. Stop talking to me. Well, we have that, but then we have this opportunity to put like this human-like face on it. Is that better? Like, are people going to like this?
It's funny. We've been building voice experiences chatbots for 7 years now, like dozens, if not hundreds of these experiences. And one thing that we've really learned is you've got to really nail the user experience. Like every added variable that you add is another opportunity to kind of turn someone off from the experience. And we love DID and we love the idea of avatars. And we spend a lot of time internally talking about what are the right use cases for an avatar. But chatbots have their own limitations. Voice activated assistants have their own limitations. Now you're adding a visual personification on front of it. It's another layer for someone to look at it and it just to feel 1% off to where they don't necessarily want to engage with that assistant. And so we have this internal discussion going on. Avatars will be right when they're right. And you've got to really nail all of those possible touch points. And the tech has to be there. There can't be lag. The lip sync has to be good. It has to have good motion and good sentiment. DID, I would argue, is one of the people leading the pack. Really great technology, really exciting tools they're launching. If anyone has a chance to do it, it's them and a couple other platforms. So excited about it, but you really got to stick the landing if you're going to do an avatar on a website or on a consumer experience.
I'd say I agree. I mean, the uncanny valley is a real issue when you're using hyper-realistic avatars as opposed to going for a more stylized, cartoonish appeal. But on the other hand, people are strange about these things where small imperfections can turn them off, absolutely. But also, once they enjoy it, or if they find it appealing in any way, they'll ignore or not even notice mistakes or weirdness in terms of what they're saying because it's coming from a face and a voice that they like in some way. I mean, they'll it's the same when talking to a person, honestly, that you won't notice things or you just it just flows by you. I think that especially as they start allowing people to upload their own photos that they'll then animate, I think if it's you have a picture of a friend of yours, or honestly even yourself talking to you, and you might just be more willing to forgive these little imperfections, and then of course over time they'll improve and have fewer problems. So I think there's a lot of appeal there, and especially depending on the context, having a voice that can become a face, or a face that can not be there and just be a voice. I think there's that sort of flexibility will be helpful for companies that want people to carry their assistant with them from their home to their car to the office and so on. Okay,
so it takes longer to have an avatar speak a response to you than it is for you to read it, right? So like you don't have to worry about latency or anything like that. Even if it's the same amount of time, it just takes longer to speak things than it does to hear things that are spoken than it is to read things. But I have to say, like spending a little time with Alice, I kind of liked it. I've spent a lot of time with ChatGPT, and after you're like on there for 10 or 15 minutes, it's just like this endless wall of text.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, oh, geez, and like visually, it's pretty interesting. Now I'm also thinking about, hey, let's say I'm driving or I'm in a hands-free, I need to be in a hands-free, eyes-free environment at some point. Could I still have access to the same things by just speaking? And I have a feeling that this is going to be really good. And like I have another data point that suggests to me that other people will like it. And I'm not just like an anomaly here. We'll have on the podcast someone, and I think it's next week, who is the product manager for a product called ADOT, which is an SK Telecom, a virtual human, like a virtual friend. It does all sorts of different things based on a generative model, talks to you, does all sorts of amazing things. They've got like 20 million monthly active users on the thing, right? So it's not like people are like, okay, so that's South Korea. Like South Korea, it's a different culture, but does that mean it's going to be popular in Japan? Does that mean it's going to be popular in Europe or the US? I don't know yet, but I do think that there's a significant portion of the population, and for specific types of use cases, that these virtual humans are actually going to, backed by an LLM, are actually going to be a superior experience for a lot of people much of the time.
Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, the history of chatbots and the history of synthetic people is that there's a segment, and it's not a small segment, of people who either they might genuinely just be lonely, or they might just not be great at interpersonal communication for some reason. But the idea of a realistically human face and voice and speech ability that is fully engaged on you and what you want to talk about is a temptation and an attraction for a lot of people. I mean, there's a reason that talk therapy is so valuable for people and attractive for people, is because that's sometimes what you want, is a face and a voice to talk to that listens and responds appropriately.
And it's interesting. We did this with you guys a couple of years ago, where we studied, length of conversation, quality of audio, and it's the longer a discussion you're probably going to have, the higher quality audio it needs to be, the higher quality image it needs to be, and so it lends the ability of keep chatbots as a very short utilitarian experience. If we're going to have more lengthy interactions, give me a really quality synthetic voice, or get me to a really highly produced, really great quality avatar that can converse with me in an elegant way.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So a lot to learn there. I think it's really cool that you can now talk to ChatGPT. So everyone check that out over at DID. I think it's chat.d-id.com. And then Usama is in the LinkedIn chat right now. He actually created a way for you to call a phone number and talk to ChatGPT. So again, that hands-free type of thing. So, hey, you guys heard it here first. Usama I think he put the phone number in the LinkedIn chat. So put that over, Usama, if you go over to the YouTube live, put it in there as well so people can check that out. Very cool, because again, like, we want to have access to these types of things. Now, whether we have access to them like in silos, like service to service, or whether it's integrated across our experience and wraps in personalization, is a completely different story. Okay, we're running a little long today. We are just going to hit on, just for like 2 minutes, this last point, because like, who doesn't want to talk about Elon Musk? So Elon Musk apparently is recruiting people to build an alternative to OpenAI. Part of it is because he believes they've strayed too far from their mission, just became like sort of the big corporate hegemon that he and some of the other founders were trying to create when they created OpenAI. Any thoughts on that, Brandon?
I'm always pulling for the guy. It's like every company, he's just got so many companies out there. You worry about, at a certain point, resource stretch, and you're just going to start making really bad products. And when he was early on involved in OpenAI, that whole mission of philanthropic, it's open, it's transparency, obviously shifting to more of like a for-profit tool-based company. That happens. I just don't know. The guy seems busy. I gotta say, I don't know if he has the bandwidth to compete with Anthropic and Stability and OpenAI. It seems like a difficult journey to go down.
Yeah, aren't we still waiting on that humanoid robot he promised a couple years ago?
I can see a Twitter extension. I could see a ChatGPT Twitter extension.
And maybe he did talk about Twitter becoming sort of an everything app. Kind of like we see out of Asia. We have some of these sort of apps that have everything in them all throughout your day. You're using them, very popular, like WeChat. And this would be the type of tool that you would want to put inside of there. I like it that he's in it, because when he does, he pushes the envelope. Everyone feels they have to be sharper. They have to be more competitive. He generally identifies things that are different that need to be solved. With that said, usually he's entering markets that aren't that competitive. And it's not like there's not fierce competitors in there, but you think of what he's done with SpaceX, you think of what he did with even with online payments when he first got into that in the 90s. But SpaceX, Tesla, he was taking something that most people had decided they didn't really want to work on, right? And then he figured out a way to do that, plus big fixed costs, right? And and all these sort of regulatory barriers. This has none of that. Plus, there's like so many people that are well funded. They have really smart folks behind them. I think the ideas or the problems that need to be solved are sort of better understood in this space. Not everyone's going to be attacking them. So I actually believe that this is one where he could probably do some things, but isn't going to have that big of an impact. But who knows? It's like hard to bet against him because he's right so often.
It's true.
All right, folks. That is another week of Gain, the generative AI news rundown. I hope you liked it. We ran just about 10 minutes long. We got to get out of here right now. But thanks everybody for staying. I hope you liked it. Come back next week at 12 noon Eastern. And we'll be live on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Brandon Kaplan, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thank you very much.
All right, Eric, thank you as well. We appreciate you holding down the fort while I was gone. Everybody else, till next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.